shop that they had, and while I was in the Navy, in California, I went to do. I liked dancing, so I went there, and they put me as a teacher, and I was there for 180 days, I believe it was.
Well, you took the course
I
and
took
then
the course.
You took the course to be able to teach?
ballroom dance.
Ballroom dance.
And then he started doing exhibitions and teaching.
And
But that's where I met him. I didn't.
yeah, well, that was an experience that memories leaves me sometime when but I was busy all the time. But
You were doing stuff all the time, all different kinds of stuff.
yeah, and when we went back to Bishopville, I knew good many of the people because that's where I went to school.
In
Right.
JC's.
And went to JC's and that, and I had a good deal. And we had a drive-in theater there, and after a good while, a couple of years, I bought that, and we kept it for a couple of years.
He ran the barber shop and the drive-in theater.
And both of them, and I had to go to Charlotte ever so often to get my film for theater and so forth, but I had two brothers. They had the barber shop when they were there. They were working at the barber shop, and so I could go somewhere else. I had one fellow that was cutting his hair, and he's a pretty good bit of it, and about after it was there a while, he'd come in one day, and he come in the store, in the barber shop. He sat down to get done, and he said, "Listen here," Ed said, "I came in here and I went over there, and there was a pot over there, and he was chewing tobacco, and he spit in it, And about a week or two, he came back, and I didn't have it in there. He said, "Ed, where's the bad thing?"
He said he missed it.
I missed it, and I said, "Yeah, that's why." And well, I was at the time I was give a lot of beautiful things to remember in the barber shop with people. I had a lot of support, and I lived up to a lot of things that we used to do there. And like, can't remember his name, but my barber, one of them,
Mr. Grady Smith.
Grady Smith, he went down to get a cup of coffee or things, and just different things that
He was putting sugar in
putting sugar in his coffee, and fellas that come over there, he had put that back when you had a good bit of like you don't have it much anymore. Like you didn't have a lot of sugar. And he said, "Grady, why don't you stir it?" And he said, "I don't like it stirred."
I don't like it that sweet.
I don't like it that sweet. But anyway, and there's a lot of things I can tell you, but I'll go on further.
Okay.
After 2 years, we did not. I started going back. I went to church, television, but I was working at the radio station.
Is this after you sold the drive-in, or is this all at the same time?
Yeah, it's,
We, well.
it's about the same time, but anyway, we had,
Well, see, after we got there, Eddie was born.
Eddie was born,
And then we built a home out on Wags Drive, where the radio station was.
Okay.
And that's when we had the twins out there.
Okay.
And then
we,
he was not going to church.
I was not going to church.
Oh.
I was going to a church, the families that I knew back,
No, at that time you were working at the radio station to being a DJ on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
You didn't go to church. I took Terry and Eddie to Hartsville. I drive because I was working in primary on Monday evenings, and that's when we had primary. And he didn't go to church with me then. But then the twins were born. And so the first Sunday that they were born September the 6th, and the first Sunday of October, I was dressing. We didn't go those few Sundays. And I told Ed, I said, Ed, there's no way I can take the babies and the other two children. Terry, 3 years old, Eddie, 2, and the twins. And I said, by myself, I can't do it, and I am going to take these babies to be blessed. You have to go with me. So he called the boy at the radio station and told him he wouldn't be working. And that's when he started going.
we did that a couple of few years. Terry was about 5-year-old, somewhere along in that. And we had all 4 of the children, and finally the theater was wasn't making
Much money.
much money out of it.
Wasn't that when the TV was becoming real popular or something?
Yeah, that when the TV, and so we decided we started going back to Hartsville, and then I went home and went back, and my brethren they were working in the hair cutting. One of them died, and the other one couldn't work anyway. So I ended up just closing that and the theater, and we moved to Hartsville. And I worked with
Jim Griffin.
Jim Griffin, and with a barber shop. And about that time we got a house that we rented, and Jim wanted me to work with him with home building. So I took a barber shop, made a barber shop of my own, and did both, and kept his monies and things like that. And one day went home, and I was sitting in this living room, and I had a thing where you put a cigarette in.
An ashtray.
And I was not a member of the church at that time, so when I sat down there, and a little bit after a few days, Terry come over to me while I was sitting there. I'd just gotten in, and she said Dottie had her keeping it clean where I was at, and she came in and she said, Daddy, I want you to quit them old things. Said, me and Mama want to go to the temple.
She said they stink.
Said, stink.
Said besides that.
And I said, is that what you want? And she said, yes, that's what I want. And she played the piano when she was 5 years old. She would play the piano and had been going to its church. And so I said, well,
No, you didn't say that
Well,
then. You said you would
I
quit.
I would quit, but yeah, I quit smoking and I don't do anything,
Anything you said.
anything that it'll be in tune with you. And so within 30 days, I went and joined the church.
Well, let me tell you about that. Can I say the call?
Yeah, thank you.
Joe and Portia Ellison were the ward missionaries, and they used to come to the house in Bishopville. They had 4 children, and their children were the age of Terry and Eddie. One of the boys was Terry's age, and the girl Eddie's age, and then the other 2 were a little bit older. But they'd bring their children over and visit with us about once a week. And Joe and Ed would talk, and Ed was reading the Book of Mormon then. I didn't even know it. But Joe was the bishop twice in Hartsville. But anyway, when we moved to Hartsville, we rented a house on Miller Avenue. It was near the old Emmanuel Church that burned, near Thornville School where I went to school. But anyway, that's where the cigarette thing happened. And then it was almost Christmas time, and I was primary president, and the primary was having, no, I was not the president then, Myrtle Braddock was the president then. But I was at the front door. We were having our primary party with the primary workers and their husbands. And I was at the door pinning corsages on the sisters coming in. And my brother Gene came over. Beanie worked in primary. Gene came over and put his arm around me and said, "I bet you can't guess what Ed's doing." And I said, "What?" And he said, "He's up there in the clerk's office, and King Solomon, Brother Solomon, they called him King Solomon, was the clerk, said he's got King Solomon finished filling out his baptismal certificate." And I said, "You're crazy." And he said, "No, he is." So I didn't say anything about it to him because I wanted him to tell me. And the next day he came home and he said, he called Daddy at the beach. Daddy answered the phone, and he said, Mom and Daddy lived at Myrtle, was still at Myrtle Beach. And he said, "Can you all get away Saturday night and come to Hartsville?" And Daddy said, "Well, I don't know. Why? What's happening?" He said, "Well, I haven't even told the family, but said I'm going to be baptized." And then he came home and told me. And of course we were very happy, you know. But the night of the baptism, Joe, Ellison, and Portia, it was freezing cold, and the old church in Hartsville had a font in the stage, under the stage. You had to lift the wood part up, and it was just blocks, just old cold blocks. And the water never got warm, and it was freezing, and Ed like froze, I think. Anyway, when he got up and got dressed and got warm, they came to the house, Joe and Portia. They were going to take us out to eat. We were going to the Beacon restaurant that had the best fried chicken of anybody, anywhere back then. And so we got a babysitter, and we got a babysitter, and I don't remember where their children. I think they all stayed at the house, but anyway, at the home where we were renting at the time. And we went to the Beacon, and we got ready to ate and just had the best time, and got ready to leave. And Joe and Portia Joe didn't have any money. He had left his wallet at home, and Portia didn't have any money with her. So Ed had to pay for our celebration, his dinner. And then we got back to the house. Well, when we went out to drive, Joe's car was about on empty, so we had to drive our car.
He wasn't very prepared, was
No,
he?
and then Ed had to pay for it, and when we got back, he had to pay the babysitter. So that was the night he was baptized. It was the 29th of November,
Somewhere along that.
I think it was. Anyway, it was right before Christmas, I believe. But anyway, that was the exciting time. And then James had built a little house out on Ruby Road, off of Ruby Road. And we bought it. That was our first, well, the home in Bishopville we built was our first home. But we lived in two different houses before we moved there. We have moved so many times. But, and I did that in a memory, you know, of the
All the places
we
that
had
you've moved, yeah.
But then we moved out there on Ruby Road and stayed there just a short while. And then we moved to School Drive, and Terry was starting school. Well, she'd already started when we were on Ruby Road, and then we moved to School Drive. And
Well, let me go back for a minute. How did you find out that you were pregnant with Mom the first time? I mean, the first time you were pregnant.
Well, I was.
Were you
No.
were you wanting to have a baby quickly, or?
Well, back then, there was no such thing as.
Well, that's true.
I mean, you had to use, you know, those little rubber things. That was the only thing they had. But we did use that a while, I think. But that was a lot of trouble, and
Yeah.
we needed to have children, and we knew we wanted children. Before I got married, I never thought I'd get married and have children. I really didn't. But the one good thing about when I was pregnant with Almond, I was never sick. I was never nauseated. Ed was, he said because he had to crawl over me there, you know. But I started craving ice cream with nuts. That's all I wanted. And middle of the night, he'd have to get up and go find. Back then, they sold the ice cream at drugstores, and there were very few drugstores open all night. And he found one though, and he patronized it quite often while we were in Charleston. And then when I got pregnant with Eddie, Terry was 6 months old when we moved to Bishopville. And I got pregnant about that right after we moved to Bishopville. I didn't know it at the time. And in fact, I never did really know that I was pregnant other than I started gaining weight. Because I was never nauseated or sick. Right. And I didn't have my periods. So when I go to the doctor, I'd find out.
Right.
And then,
tell me about Libby and Lynn too.
Yeah.
Finding out about them.
I know.
We were in Bishopville at the time.
We were in our home on
We were in
Wax
our home.
Drive.
Yeah, on Wax Drive, which is right at the radio station. And that's.
I kept asking Ed, well, why am I feeling kicking here and kicking there? And he said, well, it must be a long baby. And I couldn't figure out
Well, the
what was
doctor
going on.
didn't really know it until the last, and she had, she was not ready to, and she went back home, and when she come back, during the night, he mentioned, said, I hear another heart. And so, and then he wanted to look and see what is that, so they did
Is that an X-ray? Yeah.
yeah, and then she
Maybe.
knew it.
The young man that did the X-ray technician, when he came out, I called Ed, well, that was the story about the green apples. Jackie and I had gone to Columbia to see Joyce. She had just had Joy.
Mm-hmm.
And we had Eddie and Sandy in the back seat, and Terry, Jack and I both were big as barrels. I was a lot bigger than her, but she was pregnant with Jody, and I was pregnant with the twins. And Sandy and Eddie were in the back seat asleep, and I was driving. And we left Joyce's, and they went to sleep. We stopped at a open air market there at Fort Jackson and picked up a bag of green apples, and we were just eating those green apples away. And we had to hurry home because I had an appointment at the doctor's office at 5 o'clock. And we came out of Fort Jackson Road that we always came home on because they didn't have interstate, all that. And on the top of the hill, the car just stopped. And I got off the side of the road, and the boys were getting off work, some of them at the fort. And two young men came by, and they saw we were stopped there, and we were sitting there eating green apples, about to die laughing, because there we were, both big as barrels, and the car stopped, and we were halfway on the road and halfway off, and Jackie said, well, get out. And I said, I'm not getting out. And she wouldn't get out. And these two young soldiers pulled in front of us and stopped. And they came back there, one on each side. They thought, we were young. Yeah. And then they saw, said, you having trouble? And I said, well, the car's just stopped and I can't get it to go. And so he's put the hood up, and he did the carburetor thing and got it going. And we thanked him, and we took off, because I said, I've got an appointment in an hour, and I don't believe I'm going to make it home. And we just had to go to Bishopville. Mm-hmm. So she had left her car there. She had brought Sandy over, and to go, we went to spend the day with Joyce and those in Columbia. Anyway, when we got back to Bishopville, I showered real quick, and she called the doctor's office for me and told them that I was, I'd be there. And the nurse said, well, we'll wait, but you better hurry. We still got patients, but don't be late. And because they're supposed to close at 5, I was the last appointment. Mm-hmm. And when I got there, I was just, rushed and give out. And Jackie kept the children, kept Eddie. Terry was at the beach with Mom. So when I was up on the table and he was talking, and Ed cut his hair, the Dr. Dennis, Leroy Dennis. He delivered Eddie and Libby and Lynn. And he said, Daddy, does Ed have any, or do you have any twins in your family? And I said, well, I've never heard of any. And he said, well, how about Ed? Does he? And I said, well, I don't, what are you trying to tell me, Dr. Dennis? He said, I can detect a faint second heartbeat. And said, it's down low. And he said, I better send you to have some x-rays. And so I called Ed, and he met me at the hospital. His office was near the hospital. And so the man was the x-ray technician, took the x-rays and sent me back out in the hall with Ed. And he came out and he said, well, Ed, you've hit the jackpot. There's 2. So he called Dr. Dennis and told him, and Dr. Dennis told him to tell me the first sign of pain to get to the hospital, because the small baby was ready to come. There was one smaller than the other. They could tell on the x-ray. And so the next morning, I didn't sleep any that night.
Of course not.
And my back was hurting me so bad. And Ed called Daddy, or called down at the beach to tell him the next morning. He said, how did you tell him that there was two?
I don't remember.
Anyway, he said, I think Mama needs to come. Dottie's mama needs to come. She's having pains. And he said, well, she ought to be walking in the door. So she and T left 2 hours ago. And back then it took 2 hours from Bishopville to drive to the beach. Anyway, Mama walked in a few minutes. And Ed went on to work because Mama was there. And I went in to take my shower, and I was having pains pretty close. And Mama said, Dottie, you had another pain? How long is it? That hadn't been 5 minutes. You better get through in there. I said, I'm going to shave my legs. I don't care. So I finished shaving my legs and got dressed. And I called Ed, and he came and got me. And Mama stayed there at the house with them. And when we got to the hospital, we walked in the end door, and Ed had called the doctor's office. And the doctor said he would be there, and for me to get there quick. And so we walked in, and Ed put the suitcase down, and the doctor came around. Anyway, what was the lady, Miss Golden Mulrow, we had lived in her apartment when we first got there, but by this time we had moved into our house. She sent me a card, and she said even the clock on the wall stopped because nobody had twins back then, you know, in a small town like that. And anyway, when we came in, he put the suitcase down, and the nurse took me on to my room. And she was getting me a gown out, and Dr. Dennis walked in, and he said no. And he checked me. And now this, honest to goodness truth, I don't tell stories like
How could you make this
I
up?
was on the bed next to the window. There were 2 beds in the room. And he was on the other side toward the window. And he jumped over the bed, the hospital bed. It was down low. He jumped over the bed and went and got the stretcher himself and brought it for me to get on. Help. By then the nurse came and helped get me on the bed, the stretcher. And as we were going around the corner at the nurse's desk, the nurse gave me the shot. I don't care shot. Got me to the, and time we got in the delivery room. It was all operating room, delivery room, small hospital. I had Libby. She came. And then I heard Dr. Dennis on the telephone calling Sumter Hospital to see if they had another isolate. They called them, you know, because they didn't have but one. And so they said they would send one right over, but Lynn was big enough. She weighed 6 pounds.
Right.
And but anyway, Libby for 11 days stayed in the nursery, and I didn't get a hold of her or touch her for 11 days. And every day, or every so many hours, they would stick her toe. Her big toe had a bandage on it. It was big as her body, huge. Big as her foot, and to see if she was what they called blue baby back then, because I was RH negative. But we got to take her home in 11 days. But I had to have surgery afterwards, and I was not supposed to get pregnant after Eddie, but I did. The Lord
Yes, you
intended
did.
for those 2 little gals.
Well, that's good. Well, it's got 6 minutes left, so I don't know if we should start anything else, but we could do it another night this week too.
Well, what else? Was there something else you wanted to?
Well, I might say about going to the temple.
Oh yeah, you went to the temple.
When I joined the church in 2 years, I was about 2 years, I was made they had, wanted me to say something, on this, about, and then the first thing I said, I'm supposed to say, supposed to talk about, I don't know how to, I can't remember how to discuss, but anyway, my knees were, you know.
Were you supposed to conduct?
Yeah, and no, I was going to speak.
Oh, you were going to speak.
Yeah.
Okay. And you were nervous.
You said something about your knees playing ham bone or
Yeah.
something.
But anyway, 2 years after was baptized, we went to.
Actually, it was almost 3, Ed. You weren't
Yeah.
made a member of the bishopric, but you were baptized in 59, and we went in 62.
62.
Because we'd been married 10 years when we went to the temple, and Terry was 8 years old. She was the only one of the children that had to have a recommend to go in the temple. So,
And we
And you
drove
drew-
that little vehicle we had bought, and all 3 of them could be in the back of
4, honey.
All 4 of them.
all 4. Yeah.
That was quite an experience,
Yeah.
crossing country with
But
those
anyway,
4
that-
children in that little, it was a Tonus station wagon. And it was the smallest little station wagon. The seat would let down, so we kept them down, and I made them 4 little pillow, each one a little pillow, and had their blankets and everything, and they laid down in the back or sat up, you know. And Terry and Eddie were in the 2nd and 3rd grade, I believe. Yeah, 2nd and 3rd grade. And the teachers gave them homework to do and gave them their workbooks to take, and they had to do their stuff. I went and talked with the principal, who was a neighbor and a good friend, and Mr. Lester told Mr. George Lester, he said, Dottie, you take those children to go, said they will learn more in those 3 weeks crossing country than they could ever learn in school. And the teachers had maps, and we would send cards. Of course, we got home before the last ones
Yeah.
got there. But they followed, they knew where we were going. We had mapped out everything. And we went the northern route, came back the southern route. And we went to Logan and got married because Salt Lake Temple was closed. And it was conference time. And so when we got to Salt Lake, we stayed there a week. Back then, they had conferences 4 or 5 days, you know. And so Ed was at conference all day, and we were at the motel, and we'd watch it on TV. And between the sessions, I'd take them to the park and play. It was right, the motel was right at a park. We did that intentionally with them.
Yeah.
But, and we left Salt Lake and went down to Provo and spent the night with a friend of mine who was a girlfriend that I went to school with. And she had 5 children then.
But that was fun.
And it was, and we stayed in her basement. It was a lot of fun. And then we left there and went out to Hollywood and Los Angeles. And we spent 3 days there, and that was quite a trip. But I never will forget going. It was the first big freeways and interstates that bigger than anything we'd been on. And we were in that little car, and the World Series was on, and Ed had that thing wide open, and the children were, and I was so tense, and all that traffic, and it was the rush hour, and we were trying to find a motel, and boy, I'll tell you, that was the worst time of the whole trip. And I was trying to listen to the World Series because I love football, you know, baseball. But, and Ed was too, and then the children were. But anyway, it was a lot of fun.
That's good. Well, I think we're pretty much done here. No more space